Austria's track temperature is expected to climb beyond 50 degrees this weekend, and the FIA has already issued a heat hazard warning. For most teams, that represents a serious problem. For Ferrari, however, it could become a powerful advantage. Hidden on the rear of Lewis Hamilton's car is a wheel rim design that contributes almost nothing to outright one-lap pace, which explains why hardly anyone noticed it during qualifying sessions. Its true value only emerges across long race stints when rival teams begin overheating their rear tires while Ferrari continues running comfortably within the ideal operating window. The question heading into Sunday is remarkably simple. Can one concealed component transform the hottest race of the entire season? Yet this story does not begin in Spielberg. It begins with a single sentence buried deep inside the regulations, a sentence that almost nobody in the paddock seemed interested in reading carefully. For years, every Formula One car used effectively identical wheel rims. The supplier was fixed, the specifications were fixed, and the regulations allowed virtually no freedom whatsoever. Teams could not redesign them, modify them, or gain an advantage through innovation. Consequently, nobody tried. Resources flowed into floors, front wings, suspension concepts, and power unit modes, while wheel rims quietly continued performing the same basic function they always had, holding the tires in place. Everything changed at the beginning of this season. The rule requiring a single rim supplier disappeared. Teams suddenly gained the freedom to design their own wheels and choose their manufacturing partners. When the FIA approved that change, the prevailing belief throughout the sport was straightforward. Wheel rims simply were not expected to create meaningful performance differences. Most people viewed the amendment as a minor housekeeping exercise inside a regulation book dominated by much larger technical stories. Ferrari saw something entirely different. While most teams viewed the new flexibility as an opportunity to reduce costs on an insignificant component, Ferrari recognized an opening that nobody else appeared willing to explore. The team returned to a trusted Japanese manufacturer that has supplied Ferrari with magnesium wheels since the early 1990s, the very same company whose products supported the team throughout the Michael Schumacher era. Operating from a quiet factory in Toyama on Japan's western coast, that long-standing relationship proved essential because Ferrari required complete secrecy for what came next. Their objective was singular and precise: build a wheel rim capable of managing heat. Understanding why that represents such an intelligent development path requires understanding what actually destroys performance over an extended race stint, and it is rarely what most fans assume. Ferrari introduced the new rim during the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona, yet almost nobody noticed. That was entirely intentional. Normally, when teams bring significant upgrades, those components appear on official FIA documentation, allowing every rival engineer to study exactly what has changed. Ferrari's front rims were photographed and documented like any other part, but the rear rims remained hidden. The team carefully positioned the cars away from photographers and never listed the rear design as an official upgrade. That decision speaks volumes. When a team believes a component can genuinely influence race outcomes, secrecy becomes its greatest protection. Nothing about the strategy violated regulations. Wheel rims do not require the same declaration process as aerodynamic components such as floors or wings. Nevertheless, deliberately shielding the rears from rival scrutiny revealed how highly Ferrari valued what it had created. Importantly, the rear wheels received this treatment rather than the fronts, providing another clue. Rear tires absorb enormous punishment through acceleration zones, traction events, and sustained power delivery. They determine race outcomes far more often than front tires. When technical observers eventually obtained clear images, the reason for Ferrari's secrecy became obvious. Traditional open spokes had disappeared. In their place sat a solid ring positioned around the intersection of the rim, appearing to be constructed from carbon fiber rather than conventional magnesium. It did not look like a device designed to increase outright speed. Instead, it resembled a carefully engineered solution to a problem most spectators rarely hear about. That problem is heat, and Ferrari chose the wheel rim as its battlefield. Here lies the often overlooked reality. The greatest enemy of a Formula One tire across a long stint is not primarily the track surface, nor even ambient temperature. The true enemy is the car's own braking system. Every time a driver applies the brakes, carbon discs behind the wheels reach temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees. That immense thermal energy must travel somewhere, and significant portions migrate through surrounding components, into the wheel rim, and ultimately toward the tire itself. The rim functions as a bridge connecting an intensely hot brake assembly to the rubber that must survive 30 or more racing laps. Once excessive heat enters the tire, two damaging processes begin simultaneously. The rubber overheats, leading to graining, degradation, and steadily diminishing grip. At the same time, the air pressure inside the tire increases. A tire operating beyond its ideal pressure window rapidly loses effectiveness, and once that operating window disappears, the driver has very few solutions available. Control the bridge, and you control the tire. That is precisely what Ferrari's new rim attempts to accomplish. The solid ring and revised internal structure alter the pathways through which brake heat travels and exits the assembly, ensuring less thermal energy reaches the rear tires. Regulatory restrictions make that achievement particularly impressive. Teams cannot intentionally direct airflow through wheel rims to cool the tires. The designs must remain sealed, with no hidden passages allowing air transfer. Every concept requires FIA approval before being used competitively, and once a team commits to a specification, flexibility for race-by-race changes remains limited. Ferrari respected every one of those limitations, secured approval, and still discovered a meaningful advantage. The team calculated exactly how much performance remained available within the rules and moved decisively before competitors recognized the opportunity. Data emerging from the tire supplier this season has been remarkable. Previously, circuits such as Barcelona might produce tire pressure increases of approximately 3 pounds per square inch during a race stint. This year, teams that invested in thermal management through wheel rim design have reduced those increases to roughly 1 or 2 psi. More impressively, rear tire carcass temperatures have reportedly dropped by as much as 15 degrees Celsius. In a sport where a single tenth of a second matters enormously, a 15-degree difference represents the gap between a tire that collapses and one that remains competitive to the finish. Teams that prioritized wheel rim cooling have secured a genuine advantage, and Ferrari appears to sit among the leaders in that development race. Cooler tires deliver more than additional grip. They create strategic freedom. A tire operating 15 degrees cooler can survive several extra laps before degradation becomes critical. That flexibility provides engineers with invaluable options on the pit wall. They can attempt fewer pit stops, extend stints while rivals commit to fresh rubber, or attack aggressively during closing laps while competitors conserve resources. Cars that protect rear tires become increasingly dangerous as races progress because they possess strategic possibilities unavailable to others. The most fascinating aspect of Ferrari's innovation, however, is how invisible it remains during qualifying. Over 1 or 2 flying laps, fresh tires operate perfectly, brake temperatures remain manageable, and heat accumulation simply does not influence results significantly. Consequently, Saturday timesheets reveal almost nothing. Ferrari did not suddenly gain pole positions because of these rims, and that invisibility allowed the concept to remain hidden in plain sight. The sport naturally judges upgrades by qualifying performance because those numbers dominate headlines. Yet championships are not decided on Saturday afternoons. Imagine the progression of a race stint. On the opening lap, every team appears evenly matched. Fresh tires provide abundant grip and competitive balance. By lap 20, subtle differences begin emerging. By lap 30, the teams incapable of controlling tire temperatures find themselves sliding across overheated rubber while desperate drivers search for solutions their engineers cannot provide. That is exactly where Ferrari believes this hidden innovation can become a race-winning weapon. That is the exact moment this wheel rim comes alive. It contributes almost nothing on Saturday and nearly everything on Sunday, making it one of the most difficult advantages for rivals to identify because by the time they recognize it on track, Ferrari has already moved beyond their reach. Earlier in the season, during hot races such as Miami and China, Ferrari suffered from a very clear weakness. The car punished its rear tires, overheating them and fading away precisely in the kind of high-temperature conditions that should have favored a strong race machine. Then the revised rim arrived, and the entire picture changed. Barcelona baked under track temperatures of more than 52 degrees, exactly the type of environment that had caused Ferrari problems throughout the year. Lewis Hamilton started second on the grid rather than from pole position, proving once again that this innovation was never about one-lap speed. While competitors watched their rear tires deteriorate and lose grip, Hamilton remained competitive and managed his rubber brilliantly on his way to a commanding victory measured in nearly 20 seconds. The rim was not solely responsible for that success. Strategy, race circumstances, and execution all played important roles, but the intense heat that once represented Ferrari's greatest weakness suddenly became something the team no longer feared. For an organization that had spent the opening part of the season being undone by these exact conditions, that transformation carried enormous significance. A single clever innovation is interesting. What elevates this into a major story is what is happening across the rest of the grid right now, because Ferrari's competitors have finally understood what Maranello achieved. Once technical analysts and specialist media began examining Ferrari's quiet development work in Barcelona, rival teams could no longer dismiss wheel rims as insignificant. Red Bull, in particular, is believed to be developing its own version, with reports suggesting it could appear very soon. A regulation change that almost nobody noticed has now triggered an entirely new development race, and Ferrari entered that battle with a head start measured in months rather than days. The FIA is monitoring the situation closely and with increasing concern. A freedom that was introduced under the assumption that it would have little influence on performance has produced the opposite effect. There are growing worries about teams diverting valuable resources under the cost cap toward an expensive competition involving a component once considered irrelevant. Discussions have already begun regarding potential regulatory changes for next season to limit or standardize this area once again. In other words, the very part the rulemakers believed would not matter now matters enough to potentially inspire another rewrite of the regulations. Ferrari never violated any rules. They simply recognized an opportunity hidden within a neglected section of the rulebook and established an advantage before anyone else understood its importance. That early lead is exceptionally difficult to erase because copying the concept is not as simple as photographing it and producing an imitation within a few days. New wheel designs must undergo compatibility checks with the tire supplier, extensive fitting procedures, and regulatory approval before reaching the track. While Red Bull and other teams rush to respond, they remain behind not only in understanding but also within a lengthy and restrictive development process that Ferrari completed months earlier. The implications extend even further. Consider the teams that built their reputations on exceptional tire management, organizations that regularly won races because their tires survived longer than everyone else's. Traditionally, that strength came from years of engineering knowledge, setup refinement, and drivers capable of preserving rubber through smooth and intelligent execution. Now, part of that advantage can effectively be designed directly into the wheel itself. McLaren, a team long admired for its tire preservation, suddenly finds one of its most valuable strengths challenged by a rival innovation. That explains why a seemingly ordinary wheel rim has captured the attention of the entire paddock. All of this brings the conversation back to Austria and the fascinating test unfolding this weekend. On paper, the Red Bull Ring should provide the ideal environment for Ferrari's heat management solution. Weather forecasts predict extreme conditions, the FIA has already highlighted heat concerns, and teams face some of the highest track temperatures seen all season. Drivers are even relying on additional cooling systems simply to remain comfortable inside their cockpits. If Ferrari's rim delivers what Barcelona suggested it can, this should be the perfect stage for it to demonstrate its value. Yet Formula One rarely follows straightforward narratives. Spielberg remains fundamentally a power circuit that rewards outright engine performance. That reality creates a challenge because Ferrari's power unit still trails the strongest engines on the grid, particularly the highly competitive Mercedes package. Ferrari introduced its first engine upgrade of the year in Austria, but internally it has always been viewed as a modest improvement rather than a transformative step. On a circuit where straight-line speed determines so much of the outcome, even a substantial tire advantage has limits. Throughout practice sessions, Ferrari has not appeared to possess the fastest package, and the Red Bull Ring naturally favors teams with stronger engines and superior acceleration. Frederic Vasseur has acknowledged this openly, explaining that the SF26 truly comes alive deep into a race stint. The car becomes increasingly competitive after 20 laps rather than after a single qualifying effort, which is precisely the opposite of what teams prefer on Saturday afternoons. That means the completed grid should be interpreted carefully. Regardless of where Ferrari ultimately starts, this wheel innovation was never expected to reveal its full potential over one lap. The team has actively lowered expectations, describing Austria as a more ordinary challenge compared with the strengths shown in Barcelona. The starting order tells only part of the story this weekend. The other half emerges later, when the tires begin overheating and long-run pace becomes decisive. Ferrari continues drawing confidence from one important memory. During the intense heat of Barcelona, the team managed its tires exceptionally well in race conditions, and that remains the quality they hope will translate directly to Spielberg. So the tension heading into Sunday is undeniable. Ferrari may not possess the fastest car over a single lap, nor does the circuit naturally suit every aspect of its package, but the extreme temperatures could provide an advantage that no rival has fully replicated. That possibility alone makes this one of the most fascinating strategic battles of the entire season. Take a step back and look at the bigger picture for a moment. This season has largely belonged to Mercedes, while Ferrari has spent most of the year fighting, chasing, and slowly recovering ground one small gain at a time. An innovation like this wheel rim represents exactly the sort of mid-season development that can quietly alter the direction of a championship battle, not through one dramatic moment, but through a series of races where Ferrari begins winning on weekends that previously exposed its weaknesses. The hottest events on the calendar were once where the SF26 consistently fell apart. If this new rim has genuinely solved that problem, then every scorching Sunday remaining this season transforms from a major threat into a real opportunity, and there are still many of those races left to come. The timing could not be more important. Lewis Hamilton currently sits second in the drivers' standings, pursuing the young Mercedes driver who continues extending his advantage at the top, while Ferrari remains significantly behind Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship. For Hamilton, this campaign was always supposed to represent the difficult transition year, the period when an experienced driver joins a new team, learns unfamiliar systems, adapts to a completely different car philosophy, and gradually accepts a smaller role in the fight at the front. The victory in Barcelona completely changed that narrative. It delivered Hamilton's first win in Ferrari colors and, for the first time, made a move that many critics questioned appeared genuinely inspired. Every race weekend from this point forward becomes another opportunity to keep alive a title challenge that much of the paddock has already attempted to dismiss. Hamilton simply cannot afford to lose valuable points at circuits where Ferrari itself expects limitations. Despite Mercedes possessing tremendous pace throughout the season, reliability and consistency under pressure have occasionally remained vulnerabilities. If Ferrari can remain close enough on raw speed, a single setback for Mercedes can alter an entire championship picture. That is why the most important thing to watch on Sunday is not necessarily the qualifying order but the long runs. Pay attention to the final third of the race when leaders begin managing exhausted tires that have already delivered everything available. Observe whether Hamilton becomes the hunter or the hunted during those closing laps. If Ferrari manages to extend its opening stint beyond nearby rivals or maintain stable pace while others begin fading, that advantage belongs as much to the wheel rim as to the driver behind the wheel. Watch carefully to see whether Red Bull introduces its own version in the pit lane and whether that concept produces any immediate benefits during its debut appearance. Those moments will determine whether a hidden component designed in Japan and deliberately shielded from cameras truly justified all the secrecy surrounding it, or whether it fades quietly on a circuit that may always have represented its most difficult examination. Ferrari discovered an opportunity in a section of the rulebook that virtually everyone else ignored. Austria now becomes the place where we learn exactly how valuable that discovery really is and whether rival teams reacted quickly enough or arrived just a little too late. Now you know precisely what deserves your attention when the lights go out. Focus on the component nobody was ever supposed to notice, the subtle piece of engineering that might influence an entire championship battle. Stay with us as we continue breaking down whether this innovation fulfilled its promise and follow every twist, turn, and dramatic moment still remaining in one of the season's most compelling title fights.